Welcome to the Arizona Construction and Renovations Work Process Tutorial System. Please remember that these videos are property of the company and are not to be shared outside of current staff. Today, we will look at the proper way to fill out work orders in the Proven Jobs, or PSA, system.
All right. So I'm just going to start right at the beginning. So we're doing a training right now going over work orders.
Today, we will look at the
First
proper way to
question
fill out
should
work
be, what is
orders
a
in the
work order?
Proven Jobs, or
So basics
PSA,
here, a
system.
work order is an object inside of our system, which is obviously PSA, Proven Jobs, that houses information about the project, specifically financial information. The information is shown in the line items that exist inside of a work order. So here we can see that we've got a bunch of different work orders here, and it might be a little difficult to interpret, but I promise you it's pretty simple. So we've got concrete material and labor. We've got framing material. You can see that by FRM MAT. We got framing labor. So a work order just houses all the financial information as far as how much we charge the client and how much you can spend as a PM. So how do we use these work orders? So the work orders are used to track, manage, assign, and authorize money available to a project manager for us to purchase materials or to hire subcontractors, but also for scheduling in-house technicians. Lastly, basics of a work order, and this has to be said right up front because it's one of the biggest things that's missed, is that you have to always save. And I said that twice on purpose. So when you're messing with a work order, you need to save at the work order level. So I'm just going to use some specific language, and that'll be used throughout. So I'm going full screen by using this button over here on the top right. So when we're looking at these items on the top here, where the check boxes are selected, these are work orders. Each one of these is a work order that has a work order number. Down here, inside of the framing labor work order, these are line items. So these boxes checked. These are not small work orders or sub work orders, they're line items. So these items exist inside of a work order. So that's the structure. You've got work orders on a job, these up here. And then inside of each work order, there are line items inside of it. So that's kind of the structure of it. So we use those to obviously assign money and pay for subs, things like that. So the mantra here is save. And we do that because in this work order, if I make a bunch of edits in here, if I change the price here and I merge all these items and I change this money around and I never hit save, everything I just did was undone. None of it is meaningful. None of it happens. None of it saves. So if you make changes to anything on a work order, save here, save here. So this is the job level save. This will save everything on the entirety of the job for this. This is just a test, but everything related to info, dates, relationship, notes, attachments, work orders, anything. If you save at the top level up here with the save button, you save all of that. Saving here saves this work order for framing. So this work order, this button saves everything that I've changed inside of it. Very important. Another reason we hit save is because when you save here, it does not update these numbers at the top that we're going to be using later in the training. These numbers are very important, and when they don't change while we're making changes, it makes it really hard to tell where we're at. So when we save here, we save up here. All right. So now the actual content of a work order. So inside of a work order, inside of an item, I'm just going to click something simple. Concrete material. So this has.
Welcome to the Arizona Construction and Renovations Work Process Tutorial System. Please remember that these videos are property of the company and are not to be shared outside of current staff.
The content of a work order. So inside of this item, we can see a couple things. I'm going to go full screen again. So when I open the work order, I had the single item, and I can left click it, and that expands it to show me everything that's inside of it. So we've got a description. Ignore the product, it's not that important. A description, quantity, hours, if it's labor, a category, if it came over from a system that can interpret this. And these are basically just shorthand codes, DMO for demo, FRM for framing, PNT for paint, etc. So we've got categories. We've also got the room that it's applicable for. We can see here on other parts of the job that we might see the same item repeated again and again. This might say framing material, framing material, framing material, framing material. It could be because it's for different rooms. This is for the rear porch. If we had framing in multiple rooms, we might have it broken out by different rooms. So that just tells you, if it's the exact same item repeated 4 times and it's flooring, it's probably just 4 different rooms of flooring. So you can combine those together for your total flooring material. All right, also inside of here, we have the room and then the margin, which you can see down here, 5% margin on materials. The notes, which are also down here. So if there's a specific note that's put in there, like you're confused about specifically what it's for, hopefully if it is a confusing line item, an estimator would have added a note into there. Next, we've got these 2 blocks. We've got a blue block and a yellow block. As a PM, you're paying attention to the yellow. So this yellow money, kind of a funny thing we've used in the company and it's helped everybody remember is that yellow means that we can piss it away, right? We can spend this money. This is money for you as a PM that you can spend. Spendable money. Blue is what we're charging the client. Typically as a PM, this isn't available for your view to see what we're charging the client. Not that we don't trust PMs with that information, but it's not relevant. You care about what you can spend, not what the client paid. So out of this, we charge the client $3,409.52 for framing material. And what you can spend on materials, $3,239.44. So we can see these 2 blocks in multiple spaces. Obviously, I can click on this line item and I can see those 2 blocks where it's broken out. So if it's a material and a labor and expense, it all adds it up. But if I want to see exactly what's going on, I can click on it to open up and see these blocks here. If I click the block again, or the item, and it collapses, we see here that I can just see a summary of all that information. $3,239.04. Is it material, labor, expense? I don't know until I click into it. I just know that as a PM, I can spend this money. Alternatively, if we don't want to look here, or if there's 100 line items on this, and you don't want to manually add it, all the information for the work order that I currently have selected, which is up here, this framing one, all this information is available in the bottom right. So I can see my margin is 5%, the client total is $3409.52, our total that we can spend is $3239, maintaining that same yellow, and then I can see material, labor, expense, and hours, the total breakdown here. Again, this is just because it's not bold, right? We've got one over here on the left. We're ignoring that for now. We're just paying attention to this bottom right one. All this information is relevant to this and only this work order, FRM MAT. Because if I click somewhere else, I've got new line items, I've got new margin, I've got new dollar amounts, all of it new. So as I click through, left click one at a time, we can see that in the bottom right, this information changes every time I switch. And something like this, where we're doing a lot of labor, a lot of line items, I'd rather not look at all that, and instead I'd rather look at the total here. What do I have to spend as a PM on framing labor? $4,522.64. Excellent. And we can see here that it looks like equipment rental as well as actual labor. If you give this to a sub, we don't care what equipment they rent. We don't care what labor they spend. You've got a total that you can give them. All right, so pretty lengthy there, but that is the content of a work order. So just to kind of show you every little piece that you'll be looking at. The only 2 items that we didn't look at here are this base on. So we'll get into this later, but basically this just gives us the ability to either enter from the blue side, or if I click on, because this is price, the blue is price, or if I click on cost, you see it go white, that means I can start making edits on the cost side. So price edits, cost edits. All of your edits are going to be based on cost, and you're not going to want to calculate. But again, we'll get into that later. So don't think too much about that. Just showing you all the aspects of what we have inside of a single item, inside of every item, inside of a work order. All right. Next. So this bottom left number, I mentioned that we're not paying attention to that before, so we're going to pay attention to that now. So this bottom left is for the entire job. So we can see here this says job in bold, and on this one it says WO. So this is obviously the work orders, material, labor, expense, etc. This is the job, the entire job. All work orders collected together, all totals added together. This is what we've got. The total contract amount is $16,566.24 with a 40.14% margin, and the PM can spend a total of $9,917.19. Cool thing is, if you're subbing the entire job, you give them the scope of work, you walk the job with a sub, you give them this number, and they say, I can do it for that. That's it. You're not playing with work orders. You say, great, let's put this all into one lump and give it to the subcontractor. Makes it nice and simple if that's the case. If not, we'll get into how you can kind of use and spend that. But the big idea is just understanding that these are work orders. These down here are items. This save button is one of the most important buttons in the entire system when you're editing work orders. And we have the ability to click through these, and we understand at a glance what these work order numbers mean in general. And if we do need to get into an item, we can kind of tell a little bit what this is, and we know where to look for notes. So that is everything in regards to a work order, how to read it, and the basics. So next we're going to get into the creation of a work order. So if, for example, I wanted to separate these, right? I wanted to separate framing material because I need to make two separate purchases. Because if I'm going to make a purchase on this work order is going to become unusable in the future after I do that. When I close this work order, if I close it as is, all $3,239.04 that's usable as a PM is no longer usable. So you either spent every penny of that money, or any unspent money you're forfeiting as not needing to use it later in the job. If we do need to use it, I'll show you how to use it in a little bit. But for now, just know that if we do need to allocate money in different places, we need to create our own work orders. As a PM, when you come into a job, this is what it should look like. Not specifically, but just in general. You should have work orders created by an estimator. You should be looking at a margin of an acceptable amount for the entire job. For something that's 16,000, below 25,000 or whatever the cutoff is that you determine with the owners, with your leadership, that's fine. Whatever it is, just make sure that that percentage shows here. If you know that jobs under 25,000 should have a margin over 40,000, at a glance, this entire job is already within those numbers. So we're fine. We can continue on. If they're not, you need to have a conversation with the estimator because this did not come over with the approved dollar amounts. It never should have hit the authorized to proceed step because the numbers don't make sense. If you meet with the estimator, it's determined that there was an exception, that's fine, but you at least need to ask the question so you can cover yourself. Okay, so creation of a work order. So we have all these items sent over to us by an estimator, nice and neat and clean. We've got a dumpster, and that's just to put a dumpster on the site. I can spend $367.42. We've got overhead and profit. I can spend 0 of that. That makes sense. We're not cutting into our profit or overhead. Now we've got material, labor, material, labor, material, labor, material, labor for all the trades included, and then this fun little surplus. So we'll get into what the surplus is later, but this is just about creation of a work order. So if I, as a PM, need to create a work order for whatever reason, there is one button that does it. It's nice and easy. It says create. It's going to automatically create a pre-named blank work order. So when I created it, you notice all the items disappeared because those items were for the surplus. And I created this work order 3917 for nothing, right? It's not for anything. But if I did need to create this, I could, right? When I hit create, it gave me a work order. And if I click on this, it allows me to edit it. First step, if you ever need to create a work order for anything, is immediately name it after it's created. So I hit create, it popped out this WO3917. First step, I click this. I want to name it whatever it's for. This is for a framing change order number 1, for example, right? So I name it, save it. Now it makes sense. It's at the top. As we create more and more work orders, if we need to, they get added to the top here. And if we just create and create and create and create and create and never name anything, you end up with the messes I've seen on several jobs where, what is this for? What's that for? What's that for? Nobody knows. There's dollar amounts. It's a huge mess. So we don't create that mess for ourselves. We use discipline. We name our work orders. And then along with creation of this work order, which you just did, in this example, you would have created this work order. We named it, we saved it, but it's blank. So you need to add a line item if you want to do anything, right? You saw I hit add, this thing came up. It's just a blank, nothing work order item. So if I try to hit save, it won't let me. The field description is required. At a minimum, you need to describe what this is. So this is framing materials, change order number 1. Save. Maybe I don't know what that amount is yet. Maybe I don't need to add anything into it yet. But this isn't to figure out the specifics of how you're going to do that. This is just to show you. You can hit this button that says create, makes a blank. You rename it, hit save, add a line item inside of your work order, because we know the difference between work orders and line items. You add a line item, add a description, save, and we know the mantra. You save here, you save there. Save, save. I don't like working in this little menu, so I always go to full screen. So I'm going to hit this 4 arrow button in the top right. All right, so now we've got that change order. We've got a blank work order. We can do whatever we need to with it. All right, so we created it, we named it, saved it, added the line, added the description, save. Okay, so if I want to assign resources to this work order, I have to find those resources somewhere to transfer them, right? Because if I came in here and I tried editing this, editing the blue is not something we do as a PM, and it's going to change the contract total, which is absolutely not allowed. Do not attempt to change the blue numbers. So when we go into here and we're going to add money as a PM into here, we're going to do cost. Now, if you just do that, and I added some money here, you're going to see something. It's going to automatically assign a margin. Oops. It's going to automatically assign a margin of, I think, 30% to this. So I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to give myself $100 to spend here. We just need $100 to spend. That'll be fine. Oh, immediately it went to a 0% margin, which is weird. And it said that we have $100 now on the price, on the blue. As a PM, you don't want to affect the blue. Our total just went up $100. Our margin just changed. Disaster. So we're going to not save. I'm not going to hit the save button because I want to undo all that mess I just did. I'm going to refresh the page. So you can see I didn't hit save. Our margin, our total is still intact. No problem, no disaster. So instead of doing that, when we make edits to this, every time that we're going to make an edit, like if we're doing surpluses or we're reassigning resources, the idea here as a PM is that you're never creating those resources from nothing. You're never deciding that you're just getting money to spend. That's not how it works, obviously. You have to borrow them from somewhere else. You have to reassign them. So if we had framing material, as we've looked at before, and you had $3,239.04 to spend, but you determine that you need less than that. Well, any spillover, when we voucher this money is totally gone. So we want this number to add up to the actual number we're going to be spending. So there's no wasted resources. Sorry, I keep clicking and it opens and closes. Okay. So the 3239.04 here. If this actually only cost us $3,000, I don't want to lose my $239.04 as a PM. If I need that money later, it should be available to me. It's money I can piss away. I should be able to spend it. So the one thing that we can do here is we use this cool button called Subtrade Agreed Quote. So this button here allows us to determine the difference here. Now this is going to automatically calculate for you, so you need to understand how this works. You're going to determine the actual cost of what this total should be down here. If you say $3,000 inside of pressing this button, this total will now equal 3,000. The way that it does that is it's going to add an item for a negative $239.04. Adding that will balance out the entire total here for $3,200, but it's not going to affect the blue. So when we do this, you'll see that the blue will stay 100 or 0, and this cost, the yellow, will change. So let's do it. Subtrade Agreed Quote. This $3,239 work order, I only need to spend $3,000. So I click Subtrade Agreed Quote. I put in the amount I want to actually spend and I hit apply. Yes. $0 price, negative $239.04 cost. Total down here is $3,000. So that's what I'm spending. This can now be closed without any wasted money. But this negative $239.04 has to go somewhere. To remove confusion, that one that we created, I'm going to remove it because it's not going to be used here. So I'm going to remove that work order, or that change order. Okay, so we had mentioned the surplus before. This comes over from the estimator. This top work order that is here, this shows $190.02. Quick little math I can show you just in case you're curious how that comes about. This price on material here, $3,800.42. This says for the entire job, you have this much material to get the job, or this is how much we charge the client in total. So what we as estimators are allowed to do is we're allowed to say, great, let's take 5% of that, set it aside for the PM so they can use that for whatever they need it for. If we underestimated, overestimated, whatever the case is, this money will allow the PM some wiggle room. So $190.02, 5% of all materials is allotted to you to spend at your discretion. That's relevant here because you had whatever amount available, $3239.04 here. And then we hit that subtrade agreed quote. Well, we don't want to lose the money here. So let's account for it, right? We've got $239.04 that can be added to this surplus because that's really what it is. You have a deficit here of $239.04. Let's add that deficit and account for it here. So we're not going to create a brand new work order. We're going to add a line item to this surplus. So clicking on the surplus, I know I have $239.04. Let's check it again. $239.04. I know that I have this to add to my surplus, so we can go and add it in there. One thing that I've seen Tony do that I really, really agree with and love is that we can add an item here to account for the positive 239 and transfer it. But if you don't know what you're doing, that might be a little confusing. If you're not entirely sure how these positives and negatives balance out. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And we're going to do this a couple times because it might not be so obvious. So we hit add. There's no description. First thing we do when we add a line item is add a description. So this is going to be framing material surplus. I named it. Now I'm going to save. $0, that's fine. I click into it again. Framing material surplus. All right. I don't need a quantity, a description, notes. I don't need any of that. I go straight to this yellow box and I'm going to do a cost, no calculate. And you're going to hear me say this a lot. Cost, no calculate means I'm going to click this button and then this button, the calculate button. Cost changes it from editing price, which is what we charge the customer, to material, or I'm sorry, to cost, which is what the project manager can actually spend, the piss away money. So we're going to click cost, which highlights and makes editable all these fields here. And then I'm going to click no calculate. I'm going to click calculate. And you see here, are you sure you don't want to assign a margin? This is how you know that you've set yourself up correctly. If you go to set up this and you're trying to add money and you don't get this pop-up, you've done something wrong. Refresh the page and try again. If it's not showing up, just make sure that you're hitting this calculate button. You're saying, I don't want to calculate anything, any percentage of margin on what I'm about to change. Okay. So now, knowing that I created this deficit of 239.04, I'm going to add, since these are materials, $239.04. See that? Positive 239, negative 239. We're not going to keep this here, so don't worry too much about it. But I do want to save so that that money exists. So we've got the same amount here, but we've got the negative and the positive. Immediately after I create this, I'm going to transfer it out. So I'm going to click the button here to select this line item, and I'm going to transfer it. Where am I going to put it? Well, I'm obviously going to put this in the surplus because this is my surplus. I created it here to make sure we could see the negative and the positive on the same screen, but it doesn't have to be done this way. I'll show you another way to do it later. Basically, we had the negative amount. We created this positive surplus and then transferred it out to the surplus. So on this framing, I'm going to go back. Framing materials, it looks exactly like it did before. $3,000. This is ready to be vouchered. This is ready to be spent. On the surplus here, we went from only having $190.02 to having this additional $239.04. I did an extra step because I like the way that it looks. It's nice and clean. We created an item here by hitting add, created the positive amount and transferred it out. It's not the fastest and most efficient solution, but it does give you a check and balance to say negative, positive, good, nice and balanced. Take the positive, transfer it out. Alternatively, the way that I would do it, because I know the system and I'm comfortable, I would skip that step and go straight to the surplus instead of having the negative here and the positive here. I'd have my sub-trade agreed quote, create the negative amount here, and then I'd move on to the surplus. And I'd say add, call it framing material surplus, and do this $239.04 as a positive. So this keeps our balance, keeps our margin. The only thing it does kind of screw up here because the sub-trade agreed quote is not functioning totally correctly, is that it looks like we're spending more material than we have. What's actually happening, because we know we can click into a line item, when it created this sub-trade agreed quote, it created the negative as an expense, which is not necessarily accurate. So what we can do is, if we wanted to account for this properly, is we can do a cost, no calculate, and we can say, nah, that's not an expense, that's material. And then hit save. Now, all in all, because of the nature of this, if you're using sub-trade agreed quote across the board, we can track how much is being removed from your jobs because it's going to show up as an expense. But if you didn't want to use this sub-trade agreed quote button and you wanted to just account for the materials to begin with, I'm going to delete this surplus because I've already shown you how that functions. I'm going to delete this surplus because I've already showed you how that functions. We'll refresh this page. Basically, we just went back in time until right before we had created any kind of negative, and our framing is still at $3,239.04. So instead of doing the sub-trade agreed quote, method number 2 is to just hit the add button. And so I need to create that deficit of $239.04. I know we're kind of beating this horse dead, but trust me that it's worth it to learn in this method because the alternative is that you fumble in a real world scenario and then you got to call me and we got to figure this out. So we might be going over this again and again and again, but there's a purpose. So instead of doing the sub-trade agreed quote, you determine, I don't want to have this material show all screwed up. I want my jobs to be clean. So we added a line item inside of the framing, knowing that we need to take out $239.04 from this. So we leave that original estimator created item with the framing material, and we're going to add our own item that you can see here, this one. Well, we got to give it a description. So we're going to call this, I'm going to call it the same thing, framing materials surplus. Because even though it's a negative, it'll function the same. So then I named it, I save it. First thing you do after you name a line item is save. Okay, we need to take out $239.04. We've said that number many times, so we all know it. But we have to make sure we're doing it right. So we don't edit the blue as PMs. Cost, no calculate, okay. I'm going to redo that. We're under price. Cost, no calculate, okay. That lets us edit this with no punishment, no editing of the blue, just editing the yellow. So negative 23904. It shows it as negative. I'm going to hit save. And we always save. When we're editing money, save and save. Save the work order, save the job. Same thing. All right. But as you can see here now, this is under materials instead of the expenses. So a cleaner way to do it. Again, I'm going to go over it. We removed that. It shows 3,000 for this work order. We're only spending 3,000 on framing. Let's give ourselves that money back as a PM by going into the surplus work order, by clicking it, adding a line item, naming that line item, framing material surplus. And because I'm so efficient, I don't need to save just by naming it. I know I can immediately go over here and do a cost, no calculate, okay, of my positive to pay myself back, that $239.04. Now I save again, we save. If we're saving here, we're saving here. And now the job looks exactly the same. I've got the same amount of money to spend as a PM. My margin hasn't moved at all. And there we go. We've got this 3,000. So that was a very lengthy portion of it, but again, it's necessary to make sure that you understand, you guys as PMs understand how the money is being allocated, how you can move your resources around to empower you to buy the things that you need. It's going to be a little clunky at first, so your timing is not expected to be quick, clicking around and figuring out how these margins are determined or how you're going to be spending this money and reallocating. You really just need to keep track of your money, and that's it. Making sure you're keeping it accurate is more important than the speed. The speed comes with mastery. All right, so we created the work order, or I'm sorry, we assigned resources into our surplus. And all right, and we talked about the surplus as well. So next, we're going to talk about the life cycle of a work order. We mentioned vouchers before, but now we're going to really get into what that means. So when a work order is created, when they're given to you, resources are already allocated into them. So what we need to do in order to really be able to spend them, to be able to use these work orders, is we need to voucher them in order for you to pay a subcontractor, or in order for you to be able to purchase materials from one of our vendors, Home Depot, Lowe's, Handyman's Haven, anywhere, any vendor, you need to have a voucher. So after the resources are allocated into a work order and it's been assigned, right? Let's say we determined we needed that $3,000 only because we're buying this material from Home Depot. So the next part of the life cycle is that this needs to be assigned. So I'm going to click here under subtrades because this is the place that we can actually go into assign things. So if you left click on this framing, brings up this little menu, subtrades. So I'm just going to type in Home Depot. There's a couple, but we're just going to use Home Depot, the starred one. I'm going to hit save. So this is basically saying, this is earmarking this money without closing it and saying, I expect to spend $3,000 at Home Depot. I've already taken out the money I don't expect to spend. My cart's about $2,995, but I'm going to leave it at $3,000. So with this money allocated here and the sub assigned, the vendor assigned, next is that we have to close this to be able to spend it. So we're going to create a voucher by using the conversion button. So we've done all those edits. We've put around all the money. I know that I have 3,000 to spend, which is all I need, and I put it to the right person. Last step is that I'm going to select this box and I'm going to close it. But you're not going to use this open close button because that's not how we do that. We need to convert it. You can see estimate, invoice, deductible, voucher is what we're converting this to. When we turn this into a voucher, it's going to do a couple things. It's going to close it. It's going to send some information over to QuickBooks. It's going to prep this job to receive payment from us. So we're going to allocate resources in our actual accounting software to make this payment. This has to be done. It's a necessary step before a purchase can be made. You get a call while you're in the middle of the field. Hey, can I buy some, I need to go buy some plumbing elbows. I need to go buy some whatever. A voucher needs to be done to account for that cost. So emergencies, things that need to happen in the field, I'll leave that between PMs and leadership. The standard process is that we do this. You allocate your money, you assign a sub, and then we convert it to a voucher. Are you sure you want to generate a voucher? Gives you a little warning because we're going to close it. And you as PMs cannot reopen this. Going to give you another option. What's the voucher date? It's always today. And then voucher and voucher summary. We don't use voucher summaries. A voucher summary would be if I'm going to select multiple work orders and I'm going to convert them to a voucher. I can do a summary, which just puts them all into one page. That's not how we do things around here. Your voucher is one-to-one. So if you need additional materials you're buying from Home Depot, merge those work orders together so that everything inside of that work order is assigned to that vendor and you can purchase. But we're not going to go over merge right now. We're just trying to create a voucher. So we did all that. We selected it. We're hitting convert and we're going to voucher. I'm going to hit yes, and it's going to bring up this menu. Again, no voucher summary, just voucher. Save. You can see now a couple things. So this invoice shows closed. It's closed. And we have a voucher number. So this is going to get referenced in the future. So it's important that you know where this number is found. If you're asked to prove that you allocated the correct amount of money for this, you might be asked for a voucher number as a PM. VI-27993 is this $3,000 voucher. So this is no longer a work order. We no longer refer to this item as a work order because it's closed and it has a voucher number. This is not a work order. This is a voucher. However, in the RPO or any future messages to Jeffrey, for ease of use, if you do reference work order 3274-FRM-MAT, if you reference that, totally acceptable. However, referencing VI-27993, also acceptable. This number is easier for Jeffrey to find, but this is the official voucher number for your closed allocated resources for those materials. All right, so moving on from that, what is this voucher? What does this even mean? So a voucher is the closed work order that actually sends an object to QuickBooks. QuickBooks Online is currently the accounting software that we use. And all of this information, every single line of this information gets passed off to QuickBooks to be interpreted by our CPA, by Jeffrey, to figure out where we spent money, what we purchased, and for what job. So all of these items integrate with QuickBooks. So when you voucher this, it sends
Welcome to the Arizona Construction and Renovations Work Process Tutorial
Basically,
System.
It says, hey, this money
Please
needs
remember
to be
that
paid
these videos are
to
property
this
of the
vendor.
company and are
When
not
Jeffrey
to be shared
closes
outside of
that
current
invoice
staff.
in QuickBooks, even though you say that it's $3,000, Jeffrey understands the art of negotiation, and he has great purchasing power with many of our vendors, which means if you allocate $3,000 and Jeffrey gets your materials for $2,700, that is the power, that's the purchasing power that we have here. However, you're not earning that money back into the job because of Jeffrey's purchasing power. His ability to get us great deals adds to the margin positively only. You can't assume that because he uploads a receipt for $2,700 that you can come back in here, edit this down for an additional $300 to pay that back into your surplus. That's not how it works. You allocated $3,000, you spent $3,000, Jeffrey used purchasing power to increase the margin, but you don't earn that back. You've already given yourself your surplus. That's what this is for. So the voucher, again, is used to just show that we've allocated this money. If you as a PM come in here and you try to reopen this, these options are not available to you. These are administrative privileges. If you close it, you cannot reopen it without an administrator. So you wouldn't be able to edit it regardless. And it has to be closed prior to the purchase. So the money is gone as soon as we allocate it. Obviously, if there's a mistake, we can fix it. So that voucher being closed, being converted, empowers you to then spend this money and send something off, a note off to the appropriate entity to make sure that they understand you've done what you're supposed to and this money is ready to be spent. All right, so SCAs versus POs. So an SCA is a subcontractor agreement. And this has to do with vouchers, so we're still on the same subject. So you got two acronyms here. You've got an SCA, which is, again, a subcontractor agreement. The SCA is an agreement between us and our subcontractor that says, hey, you're going to do all the items listed on this work order, which is just the description that we add when we're sending this document over. here's all the items, here's your scope of work, and here's the dollar amount that you're going to do it for. We send this through Adobe. Potentially, we'll send it through other signing software in the future, but regardless, we use Adobe now. So the subcontractor agreement's like an 11-page document. A lot of it is just language about, contractual obligations, things like that. The actual agreement itself. The important parts are towards the end. First page says this is, the property that it's at. This is, where it's happening, whatever. That SCA you're creating as a PM to send to your subcontractors so they understand what they're doing and how much they're getting paid. In order for you to really understand how much you can pay a sub, you have to understand these work orders. If they're going to be supplying material and the labor and everything required to accomplish all the framing on this job, you should be able to come into here and quickly determine between the framing and material and labor, you can spend exactly $7,522.64. If that's not obvious, looking at this right in front of us, all I did was add the cost column here, right? Cost for, I didn't want to do that. For the material and the labor. I had to refresh. Give me a second. All right. $3,000 for the material, $4,522.64 for the labor. If you add together those two yellows, the piss away column, the money you can spend, whatever you want to call it, $7,522.64. So if you had a sub and you gave them the scope of work and say, hey, you're rebuilding this porch in the back patio, you're rebuilding the covered patio roof, you're reframing all this in the front and the back, can you accomplish that in total for $75,22.64? They say yes, we're good to go. You put both of these vouchers into one. Let's assume this was still open. You could merge these together and then assign it to one subcontractor and voucher it. Done. You've got one total to send to that person. So a voucher is allowing us to allocate that money to spend on vendors for material or subcontractors to accomplish work. So the SCA, I had mentioned that document being sent through Adobe. You have to understand how much money you have in order to start negotiating with your subcontractors. So if they're doing stucco and paint and framing and concrete, I'm just naming all the trades that are right in front of me. You would add up all of those cost columns, give them the scope of work, and if they can do it, then we can allocate that money for them to do this job. That SCA is required in order to progress, in order for us to do what's called an RFP, something we'll learn about later, but it's a request for payment. Obviously, a subcontractor getting started on a job would want a down payment, especially if they're purchasing materials. Your ability to pay them is dependent on your ability to create that subcontractor agreement and voucher what's necessary to give them their money. A PO voucher is the one that we had just accomplished. This one here for Home Depot. Purchase order. When you request the purchase order, you're going to be doing it inside of PSA referencing this work order, as I had mentioned. So if we voucher things, regardless of if you're doing it for a sub who's going to be doing material and labor, or if it's just material and we're purchasing it from a vendor. Either way, you voucher both. And you want to make sure that you're getting the best price available. And if the sub does not necessarily need that total, right? If they're going to do this job for $7,000 total, you make sure that you pay yourself back. You want to make sure that you would include a deficit, possibly on this one, pulling out the additional $522.64 in this example, and then putting that additional money in the surplus so that when you close these two, you're only closing them for the amount that you need to spend. We don't want to lose this money because then you're taking away your power as a PM. You're taking away your ability to, borrow from one part of the job to pay for another in case of a mistake, in case of an underestimation, in case of a change, just to make a homeowner happy because they're $30,000 in and we need to spend $50 to make something happen for them and you get approval, regardless of what it is. This fund up here, this surplus, is for that. You need to continue, if you have to shave off $1 from one trade to put it into the surplus, if you do that 100 times, that's $100. So whatever amount it's worth to you to give yourself more purchasing power later, you shave that amount off of these and put it into the surplus. Okay, so SCAs and POs. So we talked about those. You need to voucher for either one, for subs or for vendors. And the method that we would use to prove that we've done this, because obviously anybody can come into the system and say, oh, good, yep, somebody did this work order for $3,000. Jeffrey does not have the time to come in here and check that you've allocated this money for this job, for this trade, with this deficit. He doesn't have time. He's not supposed to navigate the system. That's not his role. What you are required to do as a PM is you need to prove to him, sorry for clicking around so quick, I was trying to find some options. You need to prove to him that you allocated this money. So we're going to make a purchase for framing to Home Depot right now to Jeffrey. We have to prove to him that we allocated this money. So just like everything else when we're editing work orders, I'm going to click this, which is just going to clear the filter. It just makes me feel good. Make sure it unselects all checkboxes. Because if I'm down here and these are selected and I forget, and I'm up here going, oh yeah, the stucco material, let's do that. Well, these two are still selected and I forgot. So I just click this. It clears all checks. And then we're going to do framing material. I checked it. I'm going to go up here to print. I am never going to left click print. I don't actually want to print this. I don't care about that. I'm going to create an attachment work order. This puts it here in the attachments. This takes this work order and puts it here, printable, sendable, attachable to notes, anything. We can use it for whatever we want. So print, create attachment work order. I know there's a lot of these very specific clicks that have to be done, so thank you for bearing with me, but it's very important that we do these correctly to make sure we're understanding exactly where this money's going. So when we click, and I'll go back and do it again. When we click create attachment work order, we're going to get a pop-up. This pop-up is important to do correctly. There's one edit that needs to be done because if we send this to Jeffrey, it's not going to have a dollar amount on it. So this show cost, we're going to change it to totals. We can show labor, show note, I don't care, but you have to show the totals. Default, it shows no, which means there's no money on this work order. Click here, click here, click here. That's it, attach. Change no to totals, click attach. Nothing changed here because we didn't edit anything, but if we go to attachments, the very last attachment on this job is the thing I just created. This is from a previous training. This is from a previous training. I can delete those. Save the job. Boom. So under attachments, by creating that attachment work order, this item was created. Now, this I can't just scroll infinitely. Eventually, these attachments, these files stop, and it creates a second page. If it does create a second page, or if this is a TPA job, there will be multiple pages. Every photo from a job that goes through insurance, through the portals, uploads every single photo to the main folder. We can't stop it. We can't change it. It's annoying. So you won't find your work order on the same page. If there's 20 pages, you have to go to page 20. It's the very last item attached here. So if you're ever looking for the work order you just created, it is the very last item out of all items on the main page. It doesn't go into a folder, which is what these are. It goes to the very last main section. So that's where you'll find your work orders that you create. We got about 8 minutes left, and I've got a little bit of material to go through, so this might run over an hour. I hope everybody's okay with that. All right. So that's printing and saving vouchers for use. Next thing we're going to go into is actually how to use them. So we've looked at our work orders. We've determined how to create them, how to name them, how to add line items and what line items are versus work orders themselves. How to add things in as a PM using the cost no calculate to make sure we're not being affected by margin and changing the contract total. We've checked what's acceptable in terms of margin across the job. We know how to find job totals. We know how to find work order totals, which only show the selected blue highlighted work order and what that information means. We know how to move a certain dollar amount, certain amount of resources from one work order to a different work order, which is the surplus, and accumulating that surplus for future spend. We've also determined how to assign a vendor, or in some cases, a subcontractor. This is the same place that subcontractor names go to. So if it was like Skylar Construction, it would be the subcontractor. Obviously, that's Home Depot. And I don't even think I can edit it because it's closed. So we determined how to assign a subcontractor. After assigning, we've determined how to convert to a voucher, which closes it. One thing I did not mention is that if you attempt to voucher a work order that is not assigned, if this is blank, you won't be able to. It's just going to give you a red thing up here. It's going to say, please assign a subtrade prior to voucher. You just have to assign somebody. We've also determined how to then print that attachment work order to create ourselves a document usable later. With all of that information, now we can actually use the money. Notes. So this is how we send out RFPs and RPOs. Both of those go to Jeffrey. So when I go into a job and I'm going from work orders, I go into notes and I'm going to create a note. First thing we're going to do, we're not going to add a subject. We're not going to type anything. We're not going to change any of that. The first place we're going to go to is these log templates. As a PM, typically, you're not freehanding anything into the system. It would just be annoying and cumbersome. We've created templates, use them, they're very good. So we already vouchered to Home Depot, so let's do Home Depot. So we're doing a purchase order, so we need to request for purchase order, also known as an RPO. You could type in purchase or order or request or RPO, and it's searchable with any of those. So with that, we select RPO. It's going to tell us, are you sure you want to populate? We're going to click yes. You're going to see a lot of things change. I think the topic, the subject, notes are going to be added, and recipients are going to be added. So let's click yes and see it happen. Topic was changed to RPO. Subject changed to request for purchase order. Finishes only. That might not be the case. This could be for framing lumber, things like that, etc. You can edit that if you need to. Perhaps we should edit the template, but we're not going to do that right now. So let's drag this so we can see a little more. I'm just clicking on the bottom right corner, holding it, and then dragging so I have more space. I want to see all this at once so I can show you. Okay, so this is what the template looks like. So I'm going to look at the notes last. So let's ignore this for now. Let's just look at this. So we got the topic, RPO, subject, RPO. We've got recipients. So this is going to Steve, Jeffrey, and projects. So 2 checks and balances, as well as the actual person who's going to be doing the purchasing. Automatically added for you is the project name with the project number, as well as the actual name itself, the address of the project, and a link to the project. This link is clickable. When Jeffrey gets this email, he can just click on it. If he's got PSA open, it'll automatically go to this job. So that link is good. Vendor. So all these blue highlighted sections are the things that PMs are going to be editing. Every time that you're doing an RPO, you just highlight the blue parentheses, and then you just start typing. Vendor, Home Depot. If you backspace too far, we're going to see that this blue turns black, and that's annoying and ugly because it makes it really easy for Jeffrey if this is blue. So just highlight back to the parentheses and stop there. Description of purchased items. Framing material for front and rear porch. Work orders referenced. Okay. I'm actually going to take this opportunity to attach the work order because I don't want to navigate away from the screen and lose my note. So when it comes time to call out the work order, I'm just going to attach an existing file. So local files, this is going to bring up my computer, my local computer. It's not on there. It's on the job. So attach existing files. Lo and behold, I've got all my folders, which I could click into and find items, but that's not where it's at. We know that it came as the last item for the work order that we just created. If there's multiple pages, you can select those here. So I click that. Work order, framing material, yep, just made that. Add selected. So we can see here that that was actually added. When this gets emailed to all 3 of these people, this attachment, the actual work order, let's look at what that looks like. This is going to be attached. So company name, when it was created, the work order number, the job name, the vendor, the customer, the project location, and the phone number for that client. This is actually our location as well, so it's unfortunate it's duplicated, but this would be the project location if it wasn't a test job. And then a description. So framing material surplus, 1 each, framing material. So this is a negative, obviously, we know that. And this is our positive amount, but we don't want to showcase all that. So all Jeffrey's going to look at is this 3,000. You're buying framing material for $3,000 and you had a surplus which you subtracted out. Awesome. You did what you're supposed to and you gave him exactly $3,000 to make this purchase. Great. So that's what Jeffrey's looking at. That's the attached file. So now I can go ahead and type in that work order number. WO, and I'm reading off of this down here. WO-3274-FRM space MAT. That is the work order number. And if we went back and looked at the list of work orders, we would confirm that that's what it's for. Date needed on site. This is up to you as a PM. I need this a week from now. So that's it. 1 week. 7 days, please. And that's it. That's an RPO. That is how you authorize the purchase of items. We went really slow and we went multiple times through that. So even though it took us an hour, it should not take you a quarter of that time once you really learn how to do this. You should be able to throw things together as PMs, put items on a work order, assign it, voucher it, surplus it if needed, and then voucher it and send it off for purchase. This, if I hit send, would go to all of these people. It is a test job. I don't want to spam them unless, Jeffrey, you want to receive it. Then I can just remove Steve and projects and I can send this solely to you so you can see what that looks like coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and send that. I know you're on this meeting. There you go. So now it shows request for purchase was put in. It records it on the job. I can click in here and I can see the note. This is also emailed and we can't edit it because, as you can see, note is emailed and we can't edit notes that are emailed. That's it. That's your RPO. Now, if this was a subcontractor, right, we go back to the work orders. And let's reopen this one with our admin privileges. Let's unassign Home Depot. And let's save. We're going to pretend like we're going to SCA this. We're going to subcontract this. I don't know why that didn't save. Try again. Refresh one more time because I'm not confident. All right, good to go. So in this circumstance, what I'm going to say, this is a different example. So we're moving on to what we're going to use for an RFP, a request for payment. The idea here is that I've already negotiated a price with the subcontractor, and I've already created an SCA with the amount that I know I have available. I created a subcontractor agreement in Adobe, filled it out, sent it to the subcontractor, and the subcontractor has already signed this amount. Since they signed it, now I can voucher these items. So I'm just going to pretend as a PM. I knew that I was pushing the budget and I knew that it was going to be hard for the sub to accomplish it. So I'm going to give them every last penny. I've already taken out some for materials, which is fine, but at least they've agreed to do it for these combined amounts. They're going to purchase the material and they're going to do the labor for $7,522.64. So to make it easy for myself as a PM, I'm going to merge these two work orders. So I selected them both. I know that I have 3,000 to spend here and 4522.64 to spend here. Check, check, edit, merge. What's going to happen here is it's going to choose one to merge. So it's going to select the top one by default, but it's going to say, hey, you're combining these. Do you want them to go into labor or do you want them to go into the FRM material? I'm going to say, screw it, I'm going to rename it anyways. Merge it into labor. So we've merged. Wow. What on earth happened there? Give me a second. All previous items just got added at the same time. Give me a moment. This wouldn't happen on a standard job. This test job has been reused so many times by me that I'm starting to freak out a little bit. All right, I'm going to save it. Let's see what we got for the combined totals. Framing labor, we have $10,000 now. Not exactly the amount that I expected. So it did not save that removed amount. Real frustrating. Okay, so for the ease of use and to make sure that this can keep moving forward, I'm going to remove every single item from this. I'm going to add one. I'm going to call this framing subcontractor amount. Oh, goodness. Ignore what I'm doing. This is not best practice. I'm doing this so that we can keep the training moving. You will not be required to do any of this real world. So 16,556.24 minus 45,42.17. 12,014.07 is what the framing is for. Is that it? $12,014.07? Yep. Okay. It's a 0% margin, so let's cut that down. Actually, you know what? I can determine this by cost. Shoot. Really annoying. I think that's what it was, 39 cents. Okay, I'm gonna let it determine margin. It did not. Gosh. So frustrating. Come on. Give it a margin. Close enough. Please do not be a hero. All right. Our contract total change, we're going to ignore the fact that I just screwed up and added or removed $10 from it because the system is just screwing up and we're going to move forward. So, okay. Ignoring the previous totals, whatever happened, we have $7,809.15. Previously, it was $75.22 something, whatever. We combined framing, material, plus labor. So what I'm actually going to do is, assuming that that just happened and there were no issues, and I didn't just have to do all that, instead of calling this framing labor or material, I'm going to call this FRM sub, because I know this is going to a subcontractor. So after I've combined labor and material, I'm going to go to the subtrade and I'm going to give it to our vendor. We use the same example, Skylar Construction, because they agreed to do it for this amount, $7809.15. So now that that's assigned to them, what I can do is I can close it. I can voucher it. I've combined the amount. We already negotiated the price. I sent them a contract for $7809.15. They signed it. It came back. Now they're requesting that initial payment. I have to prove to Jeffrey that I allocated that money correctly and that we're going to spend it and that initial payment is okay to spend. So let's prove it. Just like with the purchase order, I need to close this. So I'm going to convert it to a voucher the same exact way. I checked the box. Let's make sure I'm not selecting anything else. Check the box for framing sub. Edit, convert to voucher. Yes. So I'm closing out $7,809.15 of my spendable money. I'm saying that's the total cost to this vendor. Just like with the purchase order, we're going to select this box. We're going to mouse over print and create an attachment work order. Just like with the other one, we're going to show totals and attach. Click here, totals, attach. We don't want show cost to be no because we need to prove to Jeffrey that there's money on there. If there's no money, he can't confirm anything. Your vendor won't get paid. All right, so we've printed it, vouchered it, closed it out. We're ready for this subcontractor to get paid. Regardless of the other subs, other trades, not really concerned at this point. I've got a vouchered SCA'd work order here that's ready to get paid out for that initial payment. Just like with the RFP, we're going to go to notes. We're going to hit create. But we're not purchasing, right? So we're not doing an RPO. We are paying. We are requesting for payment. Request for payment to a sub. Click, pop up. You want to add it? Yes. So again, we're going to have a bunch of things happen at once. Topic changed. Subject changed. A bunch of notes added down here. I'm going to expand. Recipients were added. I'm going to remove Adrian. I'm going to leave Jeffrey so you can see that. And this note. All right. So it's got the name, the number, the client, the project manager, which there is none. But if there was a PM, you would be attached on here. Your name would be attached on here. And it says, Jeffrey, this is to Jeffrey, please process the following payment for the subcontractor listed below. I have reviewed the work agreement, the work/agreement, and authorized this disbursement. So you're going to need to attach two things to this to pay them. You're going to have to attach the SCA, which would have had to have been executed long before you vouchered anything. So that should already be filed in the job. You had a sub lined up. You figured out the amount, negotiated, price determined. They agreed, signed. Good. They're on the job. This is just proving that we can pay them. So you attach that because it'll be on here. I don't have that. I don't have one on here, so I don't have it to attach. But then we're also going to attach that voucher for the subcontractor's payment. So this was the first one we created. We know, because we've already learned that in this training, we know every time I click create attachment work off or work order, it becomes the last document on the job. So I can always go to the very last document and check it and be confident that's what I need. If you want to confirm it, that's fine. We can click, it'll download. We click again. Yep, this is for the framing subcontractor 780915. Awesome. Back to what we're doing, subcontractor's name. We're going to go into the note. We're going to start editing the blue again. Skylar Construction, payment type. So deposit, progress, full, final. There's tons. If you called this initial or deposit or whatever, I'm sure that could be determined what that is. Amount to be paid. Well, that depends. Depending on the vendor, some vendors, it's going to be up to you to talk to leadership and really train with them and learn with them what the expectations are. When we pay them, how much, what percent, at what progress, things like that. So let's pretend that this is a roof, because roofs are specialty trades, so it makes it very nice and simple. Half. So we're going to go ahead and take that extra penny from them up front to make sure we get our 3904.58, which is going to be half. So the amount that we're doing, 3,900, I put 9,000. $3,904.58. Work order referenced. Oh, that's nice and easy. I've got it already attached here. Work order 3275-FRM space SUB. And that I'm pulling from here. I don't know why it's not letting me select. There we go. You could copy if you want, paste, but as you can see, it's annoying to select, so whatever. All right, last one. Percentage of contract authorized. This and this, I should be able to take the total, multiply it by this percentage, and it equals that amount. So just make sure you're doing your math right. And that's it. Everything here is determined. Everything here is already filled in, pre-filled, because the note. You've got your subcontractor agreement that you would have also attached here to prove to him that we have an agreement, a contract, and then you're going to hit save. That enables you to release payment to a vendor. And that is it, start to finish, work orders. There's some small little bits that might come up. There's some small issues that we might have. As we can see, there's still definitely some issues with using work orders that have been edited multiple times. This one has been edited probably about 30 times, and something in it just broke. When I tried merging them, they obviously had some issues. So hopefully for your jobs, when they're fresh and they come to you, when you start editing things and closing them, should be very, very clean and neat when you do it. And if you do it this way, the way that I've showed you, you're going to have no issue keeping track of the money that you have spent and can spend. And that surplus will be very important when one of your subs makes a mistake, one of our in-house guys breaks a shower door, somebody, mistakes happen. This gives you a little bit of a cushion, a little bit of comfort when that happens to cushion the blow. Ultimately, the goal is to allow this entire surplus to then get funneled into the overhead and profit, so your margin is much larger at the end of the job.
This concludes our brief overview of work order generation in the PSA system. For more generalized information about work orders and other PSA functions, please check out the link below, which is available in the comment section of this video.